Can you guess who that is? Yeah, that's me. Yes. That's why this is. Some people wrote this about me. I did not write this one, but I gave them photos and answered a jillion questions so that they could write it. And it's called Beautiful Feet Upon the Mountains. You know why it's called that?
I don't know.
You don't know. Anybody know? There's a verse that where God says, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news, the tidings of great joy." In other words, those who take the gospel to other places. On the mountains, through the mountains, their feet are beautiful. What do you think your feet would look like? Real feet look like if you went barefoot over mountains? They look very pretty. No, but in God's eyes, if you're taking the gospel, they would be very beautiful. So, yeah, that's me. And that was, I did not need braces at this time. But if I was going to go anywhere like up the mountains, I had to use sticks to help me. Because when I was 5 years old, one morning when I got out of bed, went downstairs, I couldn't walk. Suddenly couldn't walk, and I collapsed and fell down the stairs because I had a disease called polio. And that disease makes it so it makes your muscles not work anymore. So all I could do was lay in bed. And the doctors were so glad that after 3 months of not being able to move, I could finally wiggle my big toe. And I started to get better after that. And see this? That was a big deal in those days. That was a little red radio beside my bed that my aunt gave me. And I learned how to turn it on, was able finally with my fingers to turn it on and find the dial, and I would listen to programs on the radio, programs for kids, some of them Christian programs. I really enjoyed those. So, how, and then, yeah, when I left the hospital then after 7 months, this is how I left, with crutches and braces all the way up to my ribs. Yeah. So, how do you suppose a person who started out that way ever ended up in a place like Korpun? Korpun was way, way, way up in the mountains of Papua, Indonesia. This is flying into the mountains there. Walking on those mountains, I couldn't do it. But God, that's where God sent me and helped me with the people. Started out by learning their language, writing down their words and their sounds, and learning their language, listening to them. And then finally was able to do some language help. Now, this is a drawing of one day when I was trying to learn the language, and I wanted to say, she might die. She is that sick. But so I said, somak doblak. which means she might die. That's what the Kimyal means, so makdoplak. And they shook their heads and they said, so makdopso. So they put a different ending on the word, not the ending lak, but so. And I found that it meant not that she will die, but that she might die. So makdopso. And then they said, but you didn't die, because God wanted you to come here to us and tell us about Jesus and give us the Bible, translate the Bible for us. Man, wasn't that something that they realized that's why God did that, kept me alive. And I had interesting times. Part of learning the language was going into their huts and talking with them. One day I went in and talked to them while a mama was cooking sweet potatoes in the fire for her family. And she had got a lizard during the day. So she put a lizard on a stick and roasted it in the fire. And that was a real treat for them, to get to eat a lizard. And so because I was a special guest, they offered me the lizard. I didn't want to eat the lizard. But I would insult them if I said no. But I had a clever thought. I said, there was a little girl in the hut, and I said, oh no, she looks like she really, really wants it, needs it more than I do. So they gave it to her. So that's part of what I did. Now, is that enough for you to come up with some questions? Mm-hmm.
Why did you pick to go to Indonesia? Why not a different place?
Why Indonesia, not a different place? That's a good question. Because when I was asking God where to go, Indonesia was one of the choices I had thought about, and I just prayed. And I prayed for several months about, okay, do you want me to go to there, to South America, or do you want me to go to Indonesia, to Irian Jaya at the time? Now it's called Papua. And or another choice in Indonesia. And as I prayed, finally, the Lord just let me know He had narrowed it down to Irian Jaya. So I picked that because I knew that's where God wanted me to be.
Did they know English?
No, they did not know English at all. And when I first got there, I did not know Kimyal at all. And there were no books about how to learn Kimyal. So I just had to learn it by listening, writing things down. You could point to your ear and say an English ear and then ask them what their word was, and in that way gradually figure out, write those down and gradually learn the language that way. Yeah.
How long did it take for you to master the language?
I never did completely master it, and I was there almost 18 years. It's a very, very complicated language and very rich and full language. But in 18 months, I was able to translate a few verses from Matthew, but after a couple of years, when I looked back at how I translated those, I thought, "Oh my goodness, these are not very good. They were not wrong. They were just not very good English or Kimya." And so I just day by day learning more and more and more. And I still, when I had to leave after almost 18 years, I still had questions in my mind about things that I had heard in the language that I had not yet been able to figure out. So, yeah, it's very, very, very complicated. You can, by the endings you put on verbs, from one verb stem, you could make over 100 different words by the verb stems that you used. So, pretty complicated. Yeah.
Did they learn English after you came back?
No, they did not learn English. A few Kimyal people now know enough English to get along in English, and their favorite thing to do is contact me on Facebook. and they will use a combination of English, Indonesian, and Kimyal. And so we'll correspond in all three languages. But yeah, some of them know some English, and that's good for them to know. And the children in the grade school now at Korapun, they are being taught English because it's good for them to know it, not to substitute for their language. They're also taught their language, but so that if they go out of the mountains into the bigger world, that would give them a huge advantage in getting jobs and things, knowing English.
What was one of the first things you thought when you came there the first time?
The first thing I taught, actually, I taught them about money because they didn't know about money. They bought the things by paying pigs. They grew pigs, a kind of a small, kind of a cross between one of our pigs, sorta, and a wild warthog, but they were domestic. But they did not have white meat like our pigs do. They had red meat. And they used pigs to buy wives, to buy garden plots, to pay for doing things they shouldn't have done, to make alliances with somebody else. So pigs that's what they used instead of money. So one of the first things I taught was I taught him about rupiahs, Indonesian money, and explained to them I started with a red 100 rupiah bill, and that was worth, like in dollars at that time, maybe about 50 cents. So that red was their favorite color. So I started with the red bill and explained what it could buy and how many of these green bills and these blue bills made up the same amount as this red bill, or how many red bills made up this bill. And so I taught them money And then we had a little store that we sold things like razor blades and salt and other things that matches to start fires with instead of their friction method. And so in that way, began to teach them what money was for. But there was a reason for that, because we knew that people from the outside, other Indonesians, would come in and try to cheat them. That's just what happens. And so I wanted them to know the value of Indonesian money so they wouldn't be cheated. So, and that doing that helped my language practice and learning as well.
Did they have a government?
Well, yeah, they had their own structure. I don't know, you'd call it government so much as their organizational structure. They had chiefs and people who would people who would organize things, the village chiefs. The Indonesian government gradually sent people in to not to live, but to introduce themselves and tell them that we're in charge now. And sometimes that was helpful, sometimes it wasn't. But they knew about government and gradually learned more and more. And now they know fully about the Indonesian government.
What's your favorite meal over there?
My favorite food among the Kimyals was a vegetable that they called bege. In Indonesian, it's sayur lilin. In English, that's candle vegetable. And it was about this long or so, about this fat, a husk, and you peeled the husk off, and underneath is this soft vegetable, kind of fibery in a way. I thought it looked like if you took a cattail that wasn't brown yet, an immature cattail, and cooked it, it would look something like the bege. But it had a wonderful taste. It was kind of the cross between corn and maybe asparagus. Yeah, I liked the taste of it. That was my favorite. Yeah. And I also liked sweet potato greens. Certain sweet potatoes, you could eat the leaves. Yeah.
Were the sweet potatoes like the same we have today, like you can buy from the store?
Yes and no. We have very few varieties of sweet potatoes in our stores. They had lots of varieties. They had orange ones, they had yellow ones, they had purple ones, they had white ones, they had yellow and purple, they had white and purple, they had all kinds of varieties of sweet potatoes. Yeah, we don't have much.
Can you share how they took you around the jungle? The method they used?
Yeah, I can. I think that there might be here's a photo of that. See that? That's how I went on those mountain trails. And it was fun. You can tell there's a smile on my face in this drawing. It was fun. Except for one time, I'll show you here. One time we almost had a bad accident on the trails. We were going alongside of a cliff that of rock, and part of it was here, and there was a very narrow trail, and then more cliff down below. And it was so narrow that only 2 carriers could be carrying me, one in front and one in the back. And there was a crack in the ground, and they had to hop over that with me. And unfortunately, the carrier in front, one of the poles that was on his shoulder hit a rock projecting from the cliff. There was a rock sticking out from the cliff, and he hit that as he jumped over the crack in the path. So that made us all completely unbalanced. And in fact, we were all leaning like this over the side of the cliff. And I knew that we were going down. And somehow, suddenly, we just got back on our feet and continued on the path. And the only explanation, the only way I can explain that is that God just did it. He just put his hand down and said, no, this is not the time for you to go. Come to me. So he put us back on the path, and we kept going. But the rest of the way home, the carrier in the back kept yattering at the carrier in the front, saying, look what you almost did to our mother. You know, and just kept bawling him out the whole way home.
Where were you going?
Where was I going? We had been to another valley for a baptism, to observe a baptism and have a feast, have some pit cooked pork and sweet potatoes and stuff, and visit with the people in that valley. And it was about a 2 or 3 hour walk away, but we were only about maybe 45 minutes from home when this happened. Yeah. So that poor guy in the front, he had to hear all that for 45 minutes.
Can you talk about your desire to be a missionary even as a child?
Yes. When I was 12 years old and felt that I knew in my heart that God wanted me to be a missionary. I think I was 12, somewhere between 11 and 13. I don't think I was 13. A man brought on Wednesday night to our church a special meeting in my little church, which was just a tiny little church in the country, a church full of farm families. Nobody particularly important, people think. But he brought with him a man from China who had heard about the Lord when he was a child from missionaries in China in his village. And this little man was very short. He was pot-bellied, and he was bald, and he had buck teeth, and he spoke very broken English, And people, there's somebody around 11, 12. That's the kind of person normally they'd kind of tune out, not a very attractive person. But he came and in his broken English told us that his body was that way because when he was a young child in his village in China, he did not get enough food. He was malnourished, so his body didn't grow right. And everybody in his village was malnourished until a missionary came to their village and told them about God and told them that they didn't need to worship those idols and give all their food and money and everything to those idols. That's not, because God loved them and he wanted them to know the truth about his sending his son to die for their sins. They could accept Jesus into their lives, receive forgiveness from God, and be free from those idols. And so his family did. In fact, most of the village did. And that meant that they could eat the food that they grew and bought instead of giving it to idols. And that completely changed everything for them. But his body was still the way it is because of that early malnutrition. So at the end of his talk, he asked if anyone felt that the Lord wanted them to be a missionary. Now, there were only a handful of farm families there, just a very few. And no way could those farmers do that. But I knew that this was the time to let my church know that I felt God wanted me to be a missionary. So at that time, I was wearing braces like I do now and using crutches like I do again now. And so I dug my crutches out from under the pew and walked to the front when he said, come to the front if you know the Lord wants you to be a missionary. But you know what? You know how you can sometimes see in the eyes of adults what they're really thinking? If they're happy or if they think, oh, brother, you can tell, can't you? Yeah. And as I walked up the aisle, I could see in the eyes of the adults sitting there that they were thinking, this little girl doesn't know what she's doing. And that kind of embarrassed me. It would you too, wouldn't it? Yeah. And I heard from someone who had been there that night, but 35 years later, when all the other adults there were already in heaven, but this one man who was over 90 years old, who had been there that night, asked me one day after church, would you like to know the rest of that story? I said, the rest of the story? And he's, yeah. He said, what you saw in those eyes of those adults along the aisle, that was the truth. That is what they were thinking. He said, in fact, one man came to the Chinese man and apologized that the only person who had responded to his invitation was this poor little crippled girl who could never do it. And then this old guy said to me, you want to know what the Chinese man said to him? I said, yes, please. And he said, that Chinese man looked the other man in the eye and said, whom the Lord calls, he will use. How about that? But you know what? I didn't hear that. And I didn't know that. So I just remained really embarrassed, and felt that I had kind of made a fool out of myself by walking up the aisle like that to that invitation. And for much of my teen years was kind of trying to ride two horses at once. Trying to be a good Christian, but on the other hand, trying to push away God's plan for my life. Ride both horses. You know what? It doesn't work. You can't do that. And finally, the Lord spoke to me in a way that I could not say a big no to, but I did say, okay, I will go to this Bible school that I know you want me to go to, but I'll just go for 1 year. So I went for 1 year, but after one semester, it was clear, nah, I was there for the whole time. So, God knows, and He won't just, if we rebel to things in our hearts, but really do want to please Him on the other hand, He knows how to get us back. Yeah.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 4 siblings. There are 5 of us altogether. I have an older sister, an older brother, and 2 younger brothers. Yeah, and really enjoyed playing with them, especially my 2 younger brothers, because there was a gap of years, 5 years, between me and my older brother. And then my sister was 4 years older than him. So there was, Mom and Dad called us the big kids and the little kids. Yeah, so I was part of the little kids.
What were your siblings' names?
What were their names? Margaret, Ernie, and then came me, and then was Harlow, and then Dick. Yeah. And Mom, when she was all flustered and trying to say something to Dick, she would say, Margaret, Ernie, Ellen, Harlow, Dick.
What was something unusual the first time you came to Indonesia that you found for yourself?
Something unusual. For me, unusual, but not unusual for the Indonesians, was the way they drove. Goodness sakes. The road between the 2 main cities on the coast, and we did have to drive between them sometimes, or from one to the other, were really windy, and they were very narrow. And they had blind curves. You know what that is? There'd be a big bank on this side that hid from you the cars coming the other direction. Well, that wouldn't keep them from going on the wrong side of the road, even though a car might be coming your direction on that side, because that was their side. And at a high rate of speed. Yeah. So that was quite an introduction. One funny, and also another unusual thing about their driving was how they would pack these little combi buses that were, I don't know, probably 9-passenger vans. they would pack them with up to 12 or more people. Some of them sitting on the edge of the seat, some behind. And then they would add in their chickens and little pigs and vegetables. They were taken to market in these taxis. And I remember riding one day on one of these taxi combis, and I was sitting next to a man who had a big bird in a gunny sack. And this big bird had a long beak, and he liked to use his big bird to pack things. And I was sitting right by him, and so I had to kind of squish even further away somehow to keep from being pecked by this bird in this gunny sack. You wouldn't have that on any of our buses or taxis, but yeah, that was kind of normal for them, that kind of thing.
So they use like cars or.
Yeah, they had cars too, but only the rich people. But most of the people didn't have any kind of private motor vehicle. They used the public ones, those combis, or yeah. It was a lot different from us. And also at night, when it would cool down, because it was on the coast where those cities where it was really, 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 really hot during the day. But when the sun went down, it would cool down. And then it would almost get too cold. And if you were driving on those roads, you would see people warming themselves by lying on the road right in the lane of traffic, expecting you to drive around them.
What did you do for fun there?
I went exploring. The Kimyals learned that I loved to go up in the forests and around and explore and see things that were not visible from where my house was by the airstrip. And so they would come to my house, and I would get in my carry thing that you saw the picture of here, and they would take me way up, and they would tell me about places. They'd say, oh, you got to go and see this waterfall, or you got to go and see this cave. So that was fun. And actually, they took me to a cave that no other white person had ever been in before. So that was kind of cool. But we didn't go very far in because there was a hole and they didn't know how deep that hole was. So we just left.
Were there bats on the cave?
Probably, but that was during the day. We didn't see any. And we didn't have big flashlights to see it on the ceiling.
What was the funnest adventure you've ever went on there?
The funnest adventure? Probably walking all the way from Sela Valley, which was on the other side of this huge mountain. Well, I didn't walk, but I rode in my mountain transport system. We walked from Sela to Korapun, and that was about a 10-hour walk. And it was so high in places, high elevation, that there were no trees there. And it was foggy. It kind of looked like Hobbit land. It was, and that was fun. That was lots of fun. But you know, it was also fun, if you could put it that way. It was more than fun. It just gave me such great joy to go to places further, well, both at Korapun, and use illustrated pictures like this to teach them Bible stories. And I would go by helicopter to some villages and stay overnight. And I'd say, I'm going to teach all the kids tonight. And I would have those materials to teach them the Bible stories. But you know what? All the adults would also come into the room. And it was just so much fun teaching them and seeing them understand and learn about God that way.
What's your favorite book in the Bible?
My favorite book in the Bible. Goodness. The one I'm reading at the moment, whichever moment it is. I read every day, and I'm going through the Bible slowly. I don't say I'm going to read a chapter a day. I read, and then, you know, if I come to I read slowly and thoughtfully, trying to trace in my mind what is being said. And if I find something interesting, I'll stop and think about that for a while. So sometimes I'll only get through half a book or half a chapter and then go on. So, and I love doing that. But it takes me a long time, sometimes 5 years, to get all the way through the Bible. But so whatever book I'm reading at the time, that's my favorite, because there is lots of wonderful wisdom from God and teaching from God in every single book in the Bible.
Have you read the whole Bible?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have several times. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your favorite book except the Bible?
Probably the Christmas Carol, the story of Scrooge, as Dickens wrote it, as Charles Dickens wrote it. It's called A Christmas Carol. And he was a master at description. He will take 2 pages to describe what he saw on the street, you know, and it's just wonderful. You can picture it through his eyes, which really helped me to learn how, you know, every Christmas I read through the Christmas Carol and notice that description. That really helped me to understand when I was writing my own book how important description, good, thorough description is.
Do you have any pets currently?
Yes, I do. And the friend who is taking care of my little dog, Dora, sends me a photo every day and tells me about how much fun Dora is having. I got Dora in October. She was 9 months old. My former dog had died from a big cancer on his liver. And I thought, well, I'll wait a month and get another dog. But after a week, I knew I had to get another one. So I went to Spokane, which is a dog rescue place. I didn't want to, you know, get a purebred or anything. I wanted to rescue a dog. And I wanted a girl this time. I'd had 2 boys, and I wanted a girl dog. So, and I wanted to name her Dora. And I had a reason for that because 2 dogs before her, the first the the first one was named Gulliver. I named him Gulliver because he was going to have to travel with me through the woods and along the paths in our country place, so I called him Gulliver for Gulliver's Travels. When he died, he lived about 16 years. When he died, I got another dog that I named Marco, after Marco Polo, the adventurer. And so I wanted to name my next, I wanted a girl the next time, so I named her Dora. Dora the Explorer. So I have Dora, and she's 17 months now, and she's fun, but man, is she a handful. The Great Commission is called great. Well, first of all, a commission. Do you know what a commission is? It's something that you tell someone to do, and it's someone who, like a business will commission someone to do something for their business. That's a commission. It's a task, a job that you are assigned to do. And the Great Commission is what we call what God told us to do in taking the gospel to the whole world. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and I will be with you to the farthest corner of the earth. That was Jesus' last words to his disciples before he went to heaven. So don't you think that the last words that he would tell his disciples to do, that was really, really, really important? The most important thing he could think of to tell them at that special time when he was going to be leaving them. He said, okay, I came and I was crucified. I took the sins of the world on me and was punished for them. I was crucified for them and buried. But I rose again and I live so that I can offer salvation to everyone in the world. But now I want you to take that message to the world. I'm not going to be here in my body anymore. I'm going to heaven. This is your job to do. So that's the Great Commission, to take the news of salvation in Jesus, the news that not just, forgiveness for our sins is a big thing, but beyond that, to learn how to live for him and enjoy that wonderful relationship with him. We need to take that news to the whole world, to everyone in the world. That's the Great Commission, the job he left us to do.
Can you pray for us?
Sure. Lord, I pray for everyone here in this room. You have given each of us something to do that is a piece, at least, of the Great Commission. Right now, for these children, that might mean telling their neighbor friend who does not know about you, telling them about you. For many of the adults in this room, it is doing things like this, organizing ways to spread the news about what you are doing around the world and how they can be involved in that. Doesn't have to be someone who's doing all the preaching and speaking, but anybody who is involved in that in any way, and many of the people in this room are. And my mom and dad were, I saw them. I would see Dad writing the checks and giving a half of a cow that he had butchered to missionaries who were on furlough to help them eat during their furlough time. Just many ways that we, all of us, you want all of us to be involved in the Great Commission. And I pray that you will show each one of these children here, especially as they are facing their years of learning and growing up and learning what you have planned for them. I ask that you will, as you did with me, not let them go, not let them stray, not let them rebel, but keep bringing them back to the point of learning the joy of obeying you and your plan in our lives. I thank you so much for doing that for me, and I pray that you will do that for each one of these children as well as they grow up and learn your ways in general and learn your ways specifically for each one of them. In Jesus' name, amen.